Now, the Presidency has responded to threats by Cape Town Mayor Geordin Hill-Lewis to declare an intergovernmental dispute if President Cyril Ramaphosa does not respond to a request to create some kind of joint working committee on rail devolution by the end of August. Now, Hill-Lewis says the city felt the impact of the recent taxi strike due to a non-functional railway system. That strike left thousands of commuters, including pupils, stranded. Now, Ramaphosa spokesperson Vincent Magwenya told News24 that the Presidency will not respond to threats in this regard. Let's unpack this now, bring in the Mayor himself, Geordin Hill-Lewis, who joins us via our telephone line this morning. Great to have you on the program, Mr. Mayor. Thanks very much indeed for making time. I wonder if we can just take a few steps back, just for the benefit of our viewers who aren't following this as closely as perhaps you and I are. What are the benefits of having some kind of devolution of the railway system? What does that actually mean?
It means that, most importantly, it means that the trains will be able to get running again. Unfortunately, PRASA, as a subsidiary of Transnet, has suffered terribly the last 5 years or more because of state capture, because of a progressive collapse in management capacity, and it now carries only 2.5%, 2.5% of the passengers that it used to carry just 5 or 6 years ago. So it really has been a tragic collapse of South Africa's rail infrastructure across the country. So what we are saying is that we are not confident, unfortunately, that it will be rebuilt at a national level. We would prefer to take over the management of that infrastructure at a local level. That's what we mean by devolving the rail, so that we can get it working again. And really, internationally, there's very few countries where cities don't run their own public transport system. We think that if we want to have a proper integrated public transport system, we do need to have rail, bus, taxi, other bus companies working in a coordinated effort run by the city.
Yeah. I imagine the Presidency would want us to believe that at the very least in principle, they too want rail to work in this country. What's been their response then from you asking at least for this kind of intervention?
So this is where it gets really interesting, because last year, in March of 22, the Cabinet actually took a decision in writing that a rail devolution would happen to quote-unquote capable metros. It didn't mention Cape Town, obviously. It just said capable metros. And so since then, since last March, we've been in correspondence with the 2 ministers of transport and the President to try and see what we can do to move that process along. It is strange to me that the National Cabinet could take a decision and then simply nothing happens. It goes silent. And so that's basically what all of our correspondence has been about. How do we move forward this process that you have decided must happen? We want to, and that's where the idea of this joint committee came from. Let's come together, form a working group, and let's start working on the technical details. This is not an easy handover. This is not an overnight or even a job of a few months. It is going to be a massive job. So let's start working on the technical details together. Yeah,
and in the interim, of course, there's commuters that have to pay the ultimate price, even just when it comes to the cost of traveling between different parts of the city. If you were to declare this intergovernmental dispute, what doors would that open, if anything?
Well, it forces the government to engage in terms of the law, but it's really something I prefer not to do. Firstly, because I want to have a good relationship with the Office of the President and work together on this. This is why I have been writing and corresponding for 18 months before I've actually, no, not quite 18, maybe 16 months before I've actually taken this step. But once you have corresponded for that length of time and you get just the normal polite responses but nothing substantive, no progress, then you have to take the next step. The second concern is that actually it's a very lengthy process. It's set down in law, in the Intergovernmental Relations Act, and it takes long to go through a dispute process with mediation and so on. So it's really something I'd prefer to avoid, but I do need some kind of substantive engagement from our government after they have taken the decision in Cabinet to do this devolution. That's all I'm trying to do, is get that decision moving.
Yeah. Look, if the devolution were to happen, I imagine it's the first of many hurdles to cross, because there's also speculation at the very least that there are those who are in charge of other modes of transport in Cape Town who have an interest in keeping rail dysfunctional. For instance, part of the unsubstantiated claims that are being made is that, for instance, those working in the taxi industry don't mind the fact that rail isn't an option for some of their commuters for obvious reasons.
Yes, I think that is very diplomatically put. That is true. That is a huge, huge risk to all public transport in South Africa. The government, when it rolled out the BRT program, which is the Bus Rapid Transit program for the 2010 World Cup, came up with a model that I think works quite well. It certainly works in Cape Town, in that the taxi companies and taxi associations are in fact shareholders in the bus system. And that has actually been a very successful partnership, I think, for us in the city. We fight about other things, as you've seen recently, but we generally don't actually fight about the bus system. It works quite well. So we'd have to try and have a model that works something like that for the train system, where everyone, including other operators of other public transport modes, benefit from a functioning train system.
That's a very interesting solution, because my question essentially was, how do you ensure, for instance, that you don't have people working against that? You know, you don't have people within the city itself, even after being given the green light from national government, quite literally, damaging infrastructure as you rebuild it.
Yes, I've made the point, and I don't have evidence for this, but I think it's a very interesting correlation that in all of the violence last week in that taxi strike, there were many other buses, Golden Arrow buses, burnt, but not a single My City bus was damaged. And I think it is at least indicative of the fact that the taxi industry knows that it benefits financially from the proper functioning of that particular system. And so you'd have to have some kind of solution like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Has the city been able to quantify how much it would cost it to actually take over rail in that province?
So we've started with what we call a rail feasibility study, and it's a very in-depth study which is aimed at essentially showing or designing for us how we would manage the rail system in Cape Town and what it would cost. So we don't yet have financial implications, but it would certainly be very significant. And one point that we have made very firmly is that it's not possible to run public transport anywhere in the world without a government subsidy. I think the research shows that there are only 2 cities in the whole world where the public transport system is not subsidized. One was Hong Kong, and I think the other one was Tokyo. The rest are all very heavily subsidized. And so we would require the subsidy that currently is paid by the National Department of Transport to the train service to also be devolved along with the trains. That would be a prerequisite.
Yeah, and I'm sure you know where I'm going with this question. Would the city be able to guarantee that the rail is affordable for those who need it? And we know that the research also points to mostly those from low-income households, even after taking it over as a province.
I think it would be more affordable than the other modes. I mean, certainly there would be absolutely no point in designing a kind of Gautrain system that is just totally unaffordable for most people. I mean, the Gautrain is a beautiful system, but it is not made for low-income families.
Right.
It's made for basically the middle class. So this would definitely be aimed at lower working class families. That would definitely be the price point. And the point that you made in your introduction, I think, is so true, is that families are currently spending 30 to 40% of their monthly income on taxis and buses, because they are much more expensive. So it would certainly be cheaper than that, and that, I think, is the most important thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Geordin Hill-Lewis, thanks very much indeed for speaking to us. Really do appreciate your time on the AM report. Look, it's difficult to find fault in the city in a context where if what they're saying, if national government can't do it, let us give it a try. And at the very least, I'd imagine many people would agree with that. Once again, Geordin Hill-Lewis is the mayor of Cape Town.